It was a scene ripped from the headlines. But from the wrong headline. On a crisp morning in Virginia, outside a federal courthouse, a figure stood before a bank of microphones. The posture was defiant. The words were laced with grievance. The crowd was fervent, chanting, their voices a wall of support. This was the playbook. The Donald Trump playbook. But the person at the podium wasn't the former president. It was the woman who once took him down. New York Attorney General Letitia James. Just moments before, she had pleaded not guilty. Not guilty to 2 felony counts of bank fraud. Not guilty of making false statements to a financial institution. Federal prosecutors, led by an attorney with her own controversial connection to Trump, were circling. The charges were serious. A scheme centered on a house in Norfolk, Virginia. A lie, they claimed, to save a few $1,000s. But the real story wasn't just inside the courthouse. It was outside. In the performance. In mimicry. This is the story of a dramatic fall from grace. A story of power, revenge, and a shocking accusation that the hunter had become the hunted. This is the Double. The Eastern District of Virginia. Known as the Rocket Docket for its swift and unforgiving pace. A place where cases move fast and convictions are common. At 11:05 a.m. Eastern Time, Letitia James stood before a federal magistrate. Her posture was rigid. Her face, a mask of stoic determination. The charges were read aloud in the sterile, silent courtroom. A stark contrast to the chaos waiting outside. Count 1, bank fraud. Count 2, making false statements to a financial institution. The clerk asked the question, "How do you plead?" Her voice was clear, unwavering, not guilty. 2 words. But they echoed with the weight of a coming storm. This wasn't a civil case anymore. This wasn't about fines or business practices. This was federal, criminal. The Department of Justice was now her adversary. And leading the charge for the DOJ? A name that would raise eyebrows in any political circle. Lindsay Halligan. A former beauty queen. Miss New York 2012. Once praised by Donald Trump himself during his pageant ownership days. Now, a federal prosecutor. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. Trump's favorite beauty queen, now tasked with putting his longtime nemesis behind bars. The universe, it seemed, had a vicious sense of humor. But James wasn't waiting for the trial to begin her defense. She was taking it to the streets. Or, more accurately, to the courthouse steps. She emerged from the courthouse, a phalanx of aides around her. She approached the microphones. The scene was instantly, eerily familiar. The positioning, the defiant set of the jaw, the way she grasped the sides of the podium. It was a carbon copy of a Trump post-arraignment speech. She looked out at the crowd of supporters. Their faces were eager, angry on her behalf. And then, she began. "I will not be deterred." A pause for effect. "I will not be distracted." Another pause. The crowd roared its approval. "I will do my job each and every day, and that's why I'm heading back to New York, because there is work to be done." The rhetoric was a perfect mirror. She was weaponizing the same tactics. Portraying herself not as a defendant, but as a victim. A martyr. She accused the Trump administration of weaponizing the DOJ for revenge. The crowd erupted. "We stand with you," they chanted. "We stand with you." The chants were loud, organized. But who were these supporters? They were a mystery. Faces in a crowd, their origins unknown. It was a pageant of power, a performance of persecution. And it was just beginning. Because while she was speaking to her supporters in Virginia, the indictment was already public. A document obtained by the Daily Mail. A document that laid out, in cold, hard detail, the allegations against her. This wasn't about political speeches. This was about a house, a loan, and a lie. Norfolk, Virginia. A quiet, residential neighborhood. The kind of place where people keep their lawns tidy and know their neighbors. At the center of this storm sits a property, a home. To the people living there, it was simply their house. But to the federal government, it was a crime scene, a piece of evidence. Letitia James purchased this Virginia residence. The price isn't the focus. The mortgage is. A loan of $109,600. Standard procedure. But prosecutors allege James engaged in a bait-and-switch. A simple, yet devastatingly effective, deception. She presented the property to her lender as a second home. A vacation house. A place for weekend getaways. Not as an investment property. Why does that matter? The terms. The interest rates. Second homes are considered less risky for banks. People are more likely to default on a rental property than a personal residence. So, the terms are better. The rates are lower. James, according to the indictment, signed a document called a second home rider. This rider was a contract, a promise. It required her, as the sole borrower, to occupy and use the property as her secondary residence. It explicitly prohibited using it as a timeshare, or a rental, or giving control to anyone else. She signed her name. She agreed to the terms. She got a favorable loan. Then, according to the indictment, she broke her promise. Immediately. The Perron property was not her secondary residence. She wasn't spending weekends there. She wasn't planting roses in the garden. Instead, she turned it into an investment, a source of income. The indictment is chillingly specific. It states she rented the property to a family of 3. A family living in a house that, on paper, was only ever supposed to be for Letitia James. The deception, prosecutors claim, saved her money. A lot of money. Nearly $19,000 over the life of the loan. $19,000. A sum that would seem insignificant to a state attorney general. A pittance. But in the eyes of the law, the amount is almost irrelevant. The crime is a lie. The intent to defraud. And the potential punishment. It's staggering. If found guilty, bank fraud, up to 30 years in prison. A $1 million fine. Making false statements, up to 30 years in prison. A $1 million fine. 60 years. $2 million. And the loss of the property itself. This wasn't a slap on the wrist. This was the rest of her life, vanishing behind bars. But why? Why would she risk it all? For a few $100s a month in saved interest? The answer might lie not in the finances, but in the psychology. In the story of a woman who had spent years pursuing a giant, and who may have started to believe she was above the very laws she was sworn to uphold. To understand this moment, you have to rewind. You have to look at the history between Letitia James and Donald Trump. It was a legal war that defined both of their careers. A grudge match played out in the pages of every newspaper in the country. As New York's Attorney General, James pursued Trump with relentless focus. She investigated his business practices, his taxes, his children. She sued the Trump Organization for fraud. She alleged he and his company routinely inflated the value of assets to secure loans and insurance, while deflating them to avoid taxes. It was a massive, complex case. A civil case. And in early 2024, she won. A New York judge delivered a seismic ruling. Trump was ordered to pay a penalty. A staggering $500 million. The news was a bombshell. For James, it was the pinnacle of her career. The slaying of the dragon. She was hailed as a hero by her supporters. A fearless prosecutor who held power to account. But the victory was short-lived. A New York appeals court later overturned the fine. The dragon wasn't dead. It was wounded. And furious. And now, it was living in the White House. The timing of this indictment is everything. A newly re-empowered Trump administration. A Department of Justice now under his command. and his most famous legal antagonist, suddenly in the crosshairs. James's defense is simple. She calls the indictment, quote, a continuation of the president's desperate weaponization of our justice system. Political revenge. A tit-for-tat prosecution. But the prosecutors aren't talking about the Trump case. They're talking about a house in Norfolk, a loan document, and a family of tenants. They're presenting a paper trail. A boring, mundane, devastatingly clear paper trail. This is the genius, or the cruelty, of their strategy. They aren't fighting her on the political battlefield she has chosen. They're fighting her in the weeds of banking law. A place where rhetoric doesn't matter. Only signatures and dates and contracts do. But James's legal team isn't without a defense. They have a story of their own. A story that involves family. And a ghost. In the wake of the indictment, James's lawyers went to work. They filed motions. They crafted a narrative. And according to court filings, they planned to have the case thrown out. Their defense? The house was occupied by a family. Not by Letitia James herself, but by her grandniece. A woman named Nakia Thompson. They claim Thompson has been living in one of the Virginia properties since 2020. This is crucial. If a family member is living there, doesn't that make it a secondary residence? A family home. It's a plausible argument. A human one. It turns a cold investment property into a home for a beloved niece. It adds a layer of gray to the black and white indictment. But then, the investigation turned. Because Nakia Thompson isn't just a simple tenant. She is listed by law enforcement authorities in Forsyth County, North Carolina, as an absconder. An absconder. A fugitive. She has an active warrant out for her arrest. The details of her case are murky, but the label is clear. She is a person who has fled from the justice system. James's defense now rests on the testimony of a wanted woman. A ghost. How do you prove your niece lives in the house if she's on the run? How do you present her as a credible witness when there's a warrant for her arrest? The prosecution will pounce on this. They will argue that even if Thompson was living there, it was a sham. A cover. They will paint her as a patsy. A convenient family member used to give the illusion of a second home. The defense's key witness is now their biggest liability. Every thread James's team pulls on seems to unravel another. The family defense is risky. It opens up a new front in the war. A front filled with uncomfortable questions. Why is your key witness a fugitive? Did you know about her status? When did you know? The simple case of a mortgage application has spiraled into a labyrinth of legal traps. And at the center of it all is Letitia James, staring down the same system she once commanded, using the same tactics as the man she once prosecuted. The mirror was cracking. Back outside the Virginia courthouse, the rally continued. The chants, the defiance. It was a perfect imitation of Trump's strategy, and it was a calculated, brilliant, and dangerous move. Trump mastered the art of political grievance, turning court appearances into campaign rallies, transforming indictments into fundraising gold, portraying himself as the victim of a deep state, a witch hunt, a corrupt system. He turned his legal peril into a source of strength. His supporters saw him as a warrior, besieged but unbowed. Letitia James was now trying to channel that same energy. For her supporters, it worked. They saw a strong black woman being targeted by a vengeful administration. They saw racism, sexism, political persecution. But for her detractors, it was the height of hypocrisy. This was the woman who represented the establishment, the system. Now, she was calling that same system corrupt because it was turned against her. The performance on the courthouse steps was more than just a speech. It was a signal. It was her declaring that she would not go quietly, that she would fight fire with fire. But the legal system is not a political arena. It is a machine that runs on evidence, not applause. Federal judges, especially in the rocket docket, have little patience for political theater. They want facts, precedent, law. James was playing a high-stakes game. She was trying to win in the court of public opinion, hoping it would pressure the court of law. But it could easily backfire. A judge could see her comments as disrespectful to the process, as an attempt to taint the jury pool. The prosecution, led by Lindsay Halligan, would be taking notes. They would be recording every word, every accusation of weaponization. They would use it against her. They would argue that her public statements prove a consciousness of guilt, that she is trying to deflect from the facts. The two battles, the legal and the political, were now intertwined, but they are fought by very different rules. And in the legal battle, the evidence was mounting. Let's strip away the politics. Let's strip away the rallies. Let's look at what the prosecution claims they have. The second home rider. A document signed by Letitia James. It exists. Her signature is on it. The terms are clear. The borrower shall occupy, and shall only use, the property as borrower's second home. That sentence is not ambiguous. It is a covenant, a promise. Then, there are the rental agreements. Leases, presumably signed by the family of three. Proof of income. Proof that the property was being used for a purpose explicitly forbidden by the loan. Then, there are the bank records. The transfers of rent payments. The paper trail from the tenants to James, or her LLC. Then, there is the financial analysis. The $19,000 in savings. The motive. It's a classic fraud case. Simple, elegant, damning. For the prosecution, it's a slam dunk. They have a lie. They have the intent. They have the financial benefit. They have evidence of the act itself. What they don't have, yet, is a confession, or a credible explanation. The family defense is their target. They will work to dismantle it. They will subpoena Nakia Thompson. If she appears, they will grill her on the stand about her status as an absconder. They will question her about the true nature of her stay. Was she really living there? Or was she just a name on a piece of paper? A placeholder to maintain the illusion? They will subpoena the tenants. The family of three. They will ask them, who did you pay rent to? Did you ever see Letitia James at the property? Have you ever seen Nakia Thompson? They will pull phone records, utility bills, anything to prove who was truly living in that house, and when. The paper trail is a net, and it is closing in. The gavel has fallen. The plea has been entered. The rally has ended. Letitia James has returned to New York, to her job, to her work. But everything has changed. She is no longer just a prosecutor. She is a defendant. Every move she makes is now shadowed by the specter of the Virginia case. Every public statement will be dissected. Every legal argument will be seen through the lens of her own defense. The mimicry of Trump's rhetoric is a high-risk strategy. It energizes her base, but it alienated the one audience that matters most, the jury. 12 people from the Virginia community. People who may not be swayed by political slogans. People who understand contracts and promises and the meaning of a signature. The trial date looms. Motions will be filed. The defense will try to get the case dismissed. They will argue selective prosecution. They will argue the family defense. The prosecution will fight back. They will present their evidence. They will argue. This is not about politics. It is about fraud. Plain and simple. Two worlds are on a collision course. The world of high-stakes politics, and the world of justice. Only one can win. The story of the double is far from over. In fact, the most dramatic chapters are yet to be written. The question is, when the final gavel falls, who will be left standing?